Thank you, James. Good afternoon, everybody. As James has explained, we have to annually do a refresher of the road closure scheme. Those of you who are volunteers, you've been trained before, you've had a refresher before, have a refresher today. It's part of the deal for legally being able to close the roads. I have to say from the very outset, bear in mind that stepping into the traffic potentially is very dangerous. In a flood emergency more so, it needs to be done in a very systematic way, in a planned way, and that's what this training is all about. James has also mentioned that immediately after this brief refresher training, I'll give you the theory. We will go outside. I'm joined by Mick Greenaway, many of you will have seen before, from County Highways. Myself and Mick will set out the signs as you would in a real emergency and give you the opportunity to handle the signs yourselves. Okay, so why do we have a scheme? Well, you'll recall there are two prime reasons. When you have floods across roads, one thing is that you can have cars going through the water, creating a bow wave, washing water into properties. Some properties that might not otherwise have been affected at all, others just making matters a lot worse. And at the same time, in some places, such as on Nottingham Road in Southwell, it is tremendously dangerous for the drivers, and they wouldn't necessarily realise it as they drive into the water, imagining it's shallow, and in places it could be very deep. For those two reasons, bow waves and the safety of motorists, it's important to close the road very quickly. And that's what Glyn was saying. At that moment that you need to close it, highways might not be there. But what we're asking trained volunteers to do is to do what highways would do if they were there, and to close the road with the same materials in the same system that highways would use. Just a reminder of the journey you've been on. This has been through already. We did a lot of work with volunteers to look at problem areas, think back to the experiences of 2013 and look at areas and decide precisely where we needed to close the roads. That led to the creation of a policy document that included the triggers, and this is crucial, I'll come back to triggers, the points where you will actually close the road safely and in a planned way. Needs to be accompanied by risk assessments. You need to attend generic training about water safety. There'll be the fire service coming on later on to do that. And specific training, actually at the point where you are going to close the road, so you're familiar with the surroundings. And we've handed over the signs, so you now have all of those signs. In this training, I have to emphasise the legal aspects to this. You are working as volunteers on behalf of the County Council. We had legal advice at the beginning to verify that you can legally close the roads. You wouldn't be causing an obstacle in the roadway illegally. You'd be acting on behalf of the County Council. The overall responsibility remains with the County Council. That's why it's crucial. You need to have training. We need to do the risk assessments. And in this presentation, if you follow that guidance and you put the signs out in the prescribed place, according to the right triggers, if there is something that happens, you're covered. You're covered by the County Council's own insurance. You don't need to worry about that. In this refresher training, I have to emphasise that if it's not you doing it, a friend of yours who hasn't had the training is doing it for you because you're not there. If they're maybe not putting the signs out in the right place and in the right manner, according to the right trigger, they expose themselves to a lot of potential problems. They would not, in that situation, be covered by the County Council's insurance. This is the set of equipment to close the road. We have also actually got a sign that says slow, so there is an extra. Most sets have got a sign that says slow. You'll remember from your previous training, as you approach the area where you want to close the road, you'd put out signs that say flood, and that would be on the side of the road. couple of cones on either side. This is so that drivers can see as they approach that there's a problem in ahead. The next sign, road ahead closed, again on the curb side with a couple of cones on either side. And then at the point where the road is actually going to be closed, if the trigger is reached, then you put these right across the middle of the road. Road closed, 2 cones either side, and there are lamps that fit onto the top of the cones. But you only do that when a specific point has been reached. For example, water reaching a particular level. At that point, the trigger's reached and you can put the signs out. And this is all recorded in the policy document. It's quite clear. We've planned ahead, planned with you where these triggers are going to be and what signs are required at which points. And it is all in maps. And I've put this particular map on specifically because this is a change. Those of you who've been trained before, this is the map you saw in the past with a road closure point 20 at the end of Farthingate. You'll see in the handbook now that road closure point, we don't have it anymore in the scheme, so I mention it particularly because that is a change from the past. There are lots of other roads leading into roads that are going to be closed, and we don't close all of those, so that's why we don't. We've removed number 20. Highlight it to you particularly because that's a change from last year. Need to emphasise again the risk assessment point perspective. In presentations later on, we will be saying more about manual handling, for example, but there's a couple of things on that list which I wanted to highlight to you in particular. Lone working, we don't recommend lone working. Please, we've got a lot of volunteers in Southwell, and we encourage you not to try and do this on your own. Lots of reasons for that, but the one at the bottom of the list is on that list, the reasons for not lone working. You will come across drivers who will be intent on wanting to drive through, and you may well find yourselves in some conflicts. Emotions will be heightened by the circumstances. They may be desperate to get to somewhere and determined to go through whatever you say. And we don't encourage you to lie down the road in front of vehicles. We want you to do the risk assessment and obviously act on account of that. So there will be circumstances where you're encouraging a motorist to take a different route, or at the very least to go through very slowly to avoid bow waves and getting into difficulties. This is where we should be now. Before it happens, as Glenn says, we hope it doesn't, but if it does, at this point you'll have identified points where the equipment is stored. Those of you who have volunteered for particular road closure points, hopefully you are aware exactly where your set of signs are being kept, and you'll have planned exactly how you're going to get them from storage out to the road. And if you're unclear on that at this point, please talk to us today to decide exactly where we're going to store them and how you're going to transport them. Okay. And obviously you need to be alert all the time now to the weather forecast. Hopefully many of you will have seen Hazel Reeves' presentation from the Met Office. She's repeating it this afternoon if you haven't seen it yet, but she'll tell you all the different ways the Met Office are going to keep us informed about when severe weather is expected. Then, in response to those alerts, or in response to a particularly bad weather forecast, you need to then be thinking about moving the signs out to the side of the road, putting them in position, obviously facing away from the oncoming traffic at that stage. Review your risk assessment and be vigilant for the triggers being met. It may be that you're looking for the water to come across the road at a particular point, or to reach a particular height in relation to the curb, or in relation to another tangible fixed point. Watch for the triggers, and if those triggers are reached, close the road. Keep in touch. You'll hear later on about the communications hub. Keeping in contact, make sure people know where you are, know you're safe, know that the road has been closed. Then, because of the nature, the road then has been flooded over, it's needed to be closed, the road will become hazardous even when the water has receded. There'll be a silt left on the surface of the road. It may well need to be cleaned, and that's where Highways will do that as they come along afterwards, assess its safety, if necessary, clean it, and they will open the road. Okay, now we're going to go outside now, but before I ask you to stand up and join me outside, are there any immediate questions from what you've heard so far?